They said it was too cold for me, I said aloud, though the room was empty. My fingers hovered over the thermostat. 20 degrees outside, yes. But I've lived through colder in this very house, long before smart heaters and weather alerts told us how to feel. The hallway light still buzzed faintly, that broken ballast I'd asked Mark to look at last year. He promised, of course. Right after the holidays, Mom. But other things always came up. They always do when it's about me. On the 27th of December, standing in my slippers, I watched their SUV pull out of the driveway. Mark, Liana, and little Zoe, waving from the back seat. I stood in the open doorway, a tartan scarf around my neck, pretending the wind didn't sting. "We're going up to a cabin by Echo Lake," Mark had said, avoiding my eyes as he zipped up his designer parka. "You know how it gets up there, Mom. Slick roads, no heating in the guest rooms. It's not a trip for someone your age." Someone your age. Funny how that phrase slips into conversation once your hair turns gray and your back starts arguing with the morning. I'd raised that boy through 2 winters in a trailer without running water. But now I was someone too fragile to handle a cabin with central heating and hot cocoa. "Next year, maybe," Liana said cheerfully, adjusting her matching snow boots. "You'll come with us then. We'll plan something more accommodating." Accommodating. They left me a tray of frozen casseroles and a cheerful Post-it note that said, "Love you, Mom," with a doodle of a heart. I microwaved one that night. Lasagna, burnt edges and cold in the middle, and ate it by the window, watching snow collect like dust on the hedge. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that presses on your chest, that amplifies every creak in the floor and every groan from the old pipes. I tried watching the television, but nothing stuck. Tried reading, but the words slid off the page. They'd be back on the 2nd, they said. Just 5 days. Not a big deal. Just enough time to remind me that I wasn't wanted. I spent the first 2 days cleaning. The kind of cleaning that makes your bones ache. I scrubbed grout with a toothbrush, polished cabinet handles, emptied out 3 drawers of old instruction manuals. When you clean with that kind of fury, you're not wiping counters. You're erasing yourself, 1 layer at a time. On the 3rd morning, I found myself standing in the living room, staring at nothing in particular. The house was spotless. My hands were raw from bleach. I checked my phone. Not a single message. Then, out of some mix of boredom and loneliness, I opened Zoe's social media account. She always added me on everything, my sweet girl, never one to hide. And there it was. A video. 10 seconds long. Palm trees swaying, blue sky, blue ocean. Zoe holding a pineapple drink with a tiny umbrella, squealing, "Hawaii is amazing." I blinked, rewatched it. Hawaii? My stomach curled in a slow, quiet knot. I clicked through to Liana's profile. Another post. Her legs stretched out on a lounge chair, captioned, "Cabin life is rough paradise found." And Mark? Mark had posted a photo of himself in a floral shirt, sunglasses on, holding a fresh coconut. The caption simply read, "Unplugging. Finally." My hands started shaking. I closed the app. Opened the next one. Email. Searched Hawaii. Receipts. Booking confirmations. From the week before Christmas. Flights, resort stays, spa packages, the Hyatt Waikiki. And every single one of them was tied to my credit card. Not the joint one. Not the emergency one. Mine. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, clutching the phone, my breath shallow. They didn't just lie. They stole. Not a mistake. Not an accident. Not something I could brush off as forgetfulness. They'd told me I was too cold and too old for a cabin trip while booking a luxury beach vacation with my money, and they hadn't even bothered to hide it. I didn't cry. You'd think a betrayal like that would break something. that there'd be shouting or pacing, or at least some kind of guttural release, but I just sat down at the kitchen table, phone in hand, the blue light from the screen washing over the silverware I'd polished only the day before. I opened my bank app. The charges stared back at me like open wounds. Flight confirmation from Denver to Honolulu, 3 round-trip tickets, a booking at the Hyatt, Ocean View. Liana's name listed on the spa packages, Mark's surfing lessons, Zoe's snorkel rental, all of it. On my card. A tight, metallic taste filled my mouth. I remembered giving Mark that card 3 years ago. Just in case, I'd said. Emergencies, or if something happens while traveling. He'd promised to use it sparingly. Only if I absolutely have to, Mom. This didn't feel like absolutely. I called the number on the back of the card. My voice didn't shake. A polite man named Jordan walked me through the charges. Yes, ma'am, all recent purchases. Yes, all confirmed from Hawaii. Would you like to file a fraud report? No, I said. They're not fraud, just unauthorized by me. Do you want to freeze the card? Yes, I said. Freeze it. Cancel it. Replace it. I don't care. Understood, he said, typing swiftly. Anything else I can help with? I almost said, can you explain how a son forgets his mother so completely he doesn't even flinch while robbing her blind? But that wasn't Jordan's job. I thanked him and hung up. The house hummed with quiet. The kind that feels less like silence and more like judgment. I sat for a while longer, listening to the heater kick on and off. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I went upstairs and pulled out the safe box from under the bed. The paperwork was all there, neatly stacked. I was always organized. Birth certificates, house deed, power of attorney documents. There it was, signed 3 years ago. Mark Hartwood, acting financial agent on behalf of May Hartwood. No wonder he felt comfortable. No wonder he'd stopped asking. I stared at the signature line. I remembered how proud he'd been, holding the pen. Just in case, Mom. It's smart. Responsible. We don't want anything to happen and have no one able to make decisions. I'd nodded. I trust you, honey. God help me, I'd said that with full heart. I set the document down. I picked up my phone and called my bank manager, Rick, a decent man. We'd chatted often back when I still visited the branch in person. Mrs. Hartwood, he answered. How can I help you? I need to remove a power of attorney designation, I said. He didn't ask why. Didn't need to. Maybe it was my tone. Maybe he'd heard it before. Of course. We'll need a formal letter, but we can initiate the process today. Do you want to suspend account access in the meantime? Yes. He confirmed some details, told me what to bring when I came in, and promised to flag any attempts at access in the system. Is everything all right? He asked gently before hanging up. No, I said. But I'm fixing it. That night I didn't eat. Didn't sleep much either. I sat on the living room couch with the TV off, watching the blinking lights on the fake pine tree I'd dragged out of storage. They looked so foolish now, those lights. Like a lie we tell ourselves every December. That joy is mandatory, that togetherness is a given. In the morning, I put on my winter coat and boots and walked to the mailbox. Bills, catalogs. One envelope caught my eye. A Christmas card. From the Wiltons down the street. Their daughter had hand-drawn a picture of a reindeer. It said, Merry Christmas, Miss May. We hope you're warm and happy. I stood there a long time in the cold, holding that silly little card like a lifeline. I wasn't warm, I wasn't happy, but I was going to be something else. Clear. The day after I canceled the card, the phone started ringing. First it was Liana, twice before noon, no message, just hang-ups. Then Mark. Hey, Mom. His voice started on the third call, leaving a voicemail. "Just checking in, wanted to see how you're doing. We should talk soon." That fake sweetness of someone trying to guess what you know. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into every account I had. Banking, investment, utilities. One by one, I changed the passwords. Some of them still had Mark's email listed as a backup. Not anymore. By midday, I had a list. Every login, every shared point of access, every auto payment I had set up that somehow involved them. Cell phone bills, Netflix, Zoe's tutoring service, even Liana's book club subscription, which she had put under my card just for 1 month over a year ago. I shut it all down. There was no fury in my hands, just precision. I kept thinking, this is what you do when someone dies. You settle accounts. You wrap up what they left behind, and maybe that's what this was. The death of trust. The end of a mother's blind hope. By evening, I had a cup of tea and a written plan. Tomorrow, I'd go to the bank and revoke the power of attorney officially. Then the lawyer. The will needed adjusting. They'd counted on me never changing anything. On my silence. My habit of forgiveness. But I wasn't angry. Not really. I was done. That night, I slept with a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. Not the kind that comes from forgiveness, the kind that comes from action. At 6:45 the next morning, my phone buzzed again. Text from Mark. "Mom, are you okay? We just tried to buy breakfast and the card got declined. Something wrong with the account?" No, "Hi." No, "We miss you." No mention of where they really were, just money. I stared at the message for a long time before locking the phone and sliding it across the table. I made oatmeal with cinnamon and apple slices. Ate it slowly. Savored the quiet. Then I got dressed and walked to the bank. Rick greeted me with that same calm voice. In his office, I signed the revocation form. He walked me through it carefully, offering copies, filing the updates. "This means Mark can no longer access or request information from any of your accounts," he said gently. "We've added security measures as well. You're the sole authority again." "Good," I said. He paused. "May I ask what prompted this change?" I looked at him. "I used to think love covered everything, that if you gave enough, they'd eventually see you." He didn't reply, but his eyes softened. I left the bank with a folder full of papers and a strange lightness in my chest. Next stop, Lawson and Pierce Legal Services. My late husband's lawyer had retired, but a younger woman named Elaine now handled his clients. She wore flat shoes and had ink on her fingers. A working woman. We went over everything. "You want to amend your will to exclude your son and daughter-in-law from inheritance," she said, confirming. "Yes." "And set up a trust for your granddaughter Zoe?" "Yes, but not immediately. I want to structure it so she gets access when she's older, not through her parents." Elaine nodded, scribbling notes. "May, if I may say, you're not the first woman to walk in here with a folder and a list and a fire in her eyes, but you're one of the calmest. Calm is what you earn after you stop expecting people to be who they never were." We finalized the draft. It would be ready by the new year. I walked home with frozen cheeks and warm hands. At the front door, I noticed the snow had drifted high along the steps. Mark used to shovel it when he was a teenager. Without asking, without resentment. That version of him was gone, but I was still here. New Year's Eve came quietly. No fireworks, no champagne. Just me, a wool blanket, and a small roast I'd cooked for myself. I'd always made too much food during the holidays. Mark used to say I cooked like I was feeding an army. I suppose I had been. An army of memory, of ghosts, of hope. Now I made just enough for one, and it was good. Simple. Warm. Around 9:30 p.m., the text started again, from Mark. Mom, can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding. Please call when you can. Zoe's asking for you. That last one made my chest tighten. She was just a child. Sweet. Innocent in this mess. But even love for a granddaughter couldn't justify pretending. Not this time. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out the old photo albums. The real kind. Heavy and dust-smelling. I flipped through Christmases past. Mark, with frosting on his cheeks, opening toy trucks. Me, in a red sweater I wore for 20 years. Laughter captured in glossy prints. What changed? Was it sudden? Or did it slip in quietly, like a draft under the door? I kept waiting for that voice in my head. The one that usually piped up with guilt. Maybe you're being too harsh. Maybe they didn't mean it. But it was silent. The roast finished. I ate in silence. Watched the clock tick toward midnight. At 11:57, the phone rang again. I let it buzz out. A minute later, a new message. We're landing tomorrow night. Please let us come by. We need to explain. Landing. So they were still there. Warm beaches. Resort buffets. The New Year's sun on their faces while mine pressed against icy windows. Explain what, exactly? That they saw me as an old coat. Worn, familiar, kept around for comfort but not suitable for outings? I turned off the phone. At midnight, I stood by the window and looked out over the snowy lawn. The neighbors' teenage sons were lighting sparklers in the driveway, their laughter high and sharp. I smiled, not bitter, just tired. I whispered aloud, "Happy New Year, May." For once I meant it. New Year's Day was bright and still. I slept late, took a long bath, let myself move slowly, luxuriously, like someone in no rush to meet anyone else's needs. Then I gathered a few boxes from the attic. Mark's things, old trophies, his childhood books, a varsity jacket he'd left in my closet years ago. I packed them up carefully, not as a punishment, but as a return. These things didn't belong here anymore. They didn't belong to the version of my son who used my credit card for my ties. Next, I moved into the guest room, the one they always used when they visited. I opened drawers. Cleared out Liana's skincare bottles, Zoe's coloring pads. Everything went into another box. By early afternoon, the house felt different. Lighter. Stripped of pretense. There's a power in reclaiming space. Not just physical, emotional. I was making room for myself. I paused at the hallway shelf. There was a frame there, one I hadn't noticed in months. It was a family portrait. Thanksgiving 4 years ago. All of us around the table, smiling. I stared at my own face in that photo. I looked tired, even then. Like someone hanging on for dear life to an idea of closeness that had already unraveled. I took the frame down, slid out the photo. Not in anger, in clarity. Some pictures don't need to be on display. Later, I opened a new notebook. Blank, cream-colored pages. At the top, I wrote, "What I will no longer apologize for." Then the list. Saying no. Spending money on myself. Expecting respect without begging for it. Refusing to be gaslit by people who should know better. Wanting peace more than approval. I closed the notebook. The sun was already low, slanting through the kitchen window. Light hit the table just right. Golden. Clean. Tomorrow, they'd be back. They'd knock. They'd smile too wide. They'd talk fast. But I was ready. The knock came at 6:12 p.m. the next day. I was in the middle of folding towels. Ordinary, unremarkable towels that had nothing to do with betrayal or apologies, or the weight of a broken holiday. I didn't rush to the door. Let them wait. When I finally opened it, Mark stood there in a pressed polo and khaki shorts, looking out of place against the January frost. Liana was behind him, her face tight with forced cheer. Zoe, wrapped in a puffy jacket far too light for the weather, clutched a souvenir ukulele. "Hi, Mom," Mark said. I said nothing. We just got in, he added, unnecessarily. Zoe stepped forward. Grandma, I missed you. I knelt down and hugged her, heart tightening. Her hair smelled like salt and sunscreen, not a trace of winter. I missed you too, baby, I said softly, then stood back up and looked at the two adults behind her. Can we come in? Liana asked, her voice brittle. I stepped aside, not out of kindness, just formality. They came into the living room and stopped short. The house looked different, and not just because I'd put away their things. It felt different. No extra coats hanging by the door, no cluttered corners left for when they come by. Every inch of space now reflected someone who lived alone and intended to. They sat. I didn't offer tea. Zoe sat cross-legged on the carpet, plucking at the ukulele. We noticed the card stopped working, Mark began, cautious. I figured maybe there was an issue with the bank. No issue, I said. I canceled it. Oh. Silence. We should have told you, Liana blurted, about Hawaii. Yes, I said. You should have. We didn't mean to hurt you, Mark added. It was last minute. Liana's sister had this connection at the resort, and the deal was too good to pass up. He looked at me, searching for something. Sympathy, leniency, weakness? I gave him none. And the credit card? I asked. He winced. That was a mistake. I thought we had permission from before. That was 3 years ago, I said. And it was for emergencies. He said nothing. I looked at Zoe. Sweetheart, why don't you take your ukulele to the kitchen for a minute? There's a bowl of hard candy by the phone. She nodded eagerly and skipped away. Only when she was out of sight did I speak. You lied to me, I said. You let me believe you were going somewhere cold, somewhere I couldn't handle, because it was easier than telling me I wasn't invited. Mark's jaw tightened. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? We just wanted a break. Something private. For us. And you used my money to pay for that privacy. He looked away. I revoked your access, I continued. To everything. Power of attorney, bank accounts. It's done. Liana gasped. May, don't you think that's a bit extreme? We've always helped manage things for you. No, I said, my voice even. You managed things for yourselves. You used my silence as permission. Liana opened her mouth again, but I raised a hand. I'm not arguing. I'm informing. Mark leaned forward, elbows on knees. We're still family. Yes, I said. And that means something. It should have meant something when you made those decisions. He sat back. Liana crossed her arms. You're overreacting, she muttered. No, I said. I'm reacting. For once. The front door felt like it was pulling me toward it. A force, a gravity of dismissal I'd never allowed myself to use. But now I did. You should go, I said quietly. Mark looked stunned. You're kicking us out? I'm asking you to leave until I want to talk again, if that day comes. Zoe appeared in the doorway, mouth sticky with candy. Are we going, Daddy? Mark stood. So did Liana. They left without another word. I stood by the window as their car backed out of the driveway. For once, I wasn't the one left behind. That night, I put fresh sheets on the guest bed. Not for company, for myself. I'd decided to stop sleeping in the master bedroom, not out of grief or punishment, but out of clarity. That room had become a museum of old roles, a wife, a mother, a giver. Too many echoes in those walls, too many habits that no longer served me. The guest room was smaller, cozier, a blank slate. It had always been their room when they visited, stacked with Zoe's coloring books, Liana's night creams, Mark's suitcase wedged under the bed. But now it was mine. I stripped the shelves, replaced framed family photos with landscapes, moved my favorite books to the nightstand. A small gesture, but it felt enormous, like I was taking my name back from the edge of their lives. The next morning, I made coffee and sat at the table in silence. No voicemail, no texts, just a quiet so full it felt almost musical. I opened the notebook again, the one with the list, things I will no longer justify. Giving away peace for the illusion of family, covering for their choices to save face. Pretending I don't notice when I'm being used. I closed the notebook. Then I opened a new drawer and began organizing. Receipts, statements, legal documents. Everything that used to be scattered across 3 filing cabinets and a shoebox under the sink. Order brought something I hadn't felt in a long time. Strength. By afternoon, I'd gathered a list of all accounts, streaming services, subscriptions, memberships that I'd opened at their request. I canceled them all. It felt less like revenge, more like exhaling. In the back of one envelope, I found a handwritten note, marks from when Zoe was born. Mom, thank you for covering the hospital bills. I'll pay you back soon. Love, Mark. He never did. I placed the note back in the envelope, sealed it, and wrote on the front, no longer owed, just remembered. At 4, I bundled up and walked 2 blocks to the notary office. Inside, a young woman, barely 30, looked over the paperwork Elaine had prepared. You're transferring ownership of your house into a living trust? She asked. Yes. And excluding all children from any future claims? Yes. She hesitated. You sure you don't want to name them as contingent beneficiaries? I'm sure. She stamped the documents. As I left, the wind bit at my cheeks, but I felt warm inside. The kind of warmth that comes not from heaters or tea, but from standing fully in your own life. Back home, I made soup from scratch. Ate slowly, with the radio playing faint jazz. The quiet no longer hurt. It hummed like a promise. 3 days passed without a single call. Not from Mark, not from Liana, not even a text from Zoe. Though I suspected that part wasn't her fault. She didn't own a phone yet. Liana had always said it was too much exposure. But I wondered if she'd even been told she could write to me. I sat by the window that Friday morning, watching the mail truck pull up. A single envelope slid into the box. It wasn't a letter, just a bill. Nothing personal. That used to bother me. Now it didn't. There was something oddly stabilizing in knowing where you stood, no matter how cold that place was. That afternoon, I pulled out a stack of old Christmas ornaments from the attic. I used to keep them for family visits. They'd sit in boxes most years because the family never stayed long enough to need them. I sorted them one by one, broken ones tossed, delicate ones packed into new tissue. A small set of ceramic angels, chipped and yellowed, made me pause. I remembered buying them at a church bazaar in 1983. Mark had been 7. He'd chosen them. He used to love angels, used to believe in them. I wrapped them gently and set them aside. By evening, I'd cleared 2 closets. One held old coats, most of them not mine. The other held Liana's leftover toiletries, wedding guest favors, Zoe's old shoes. I packed them all. 2 boxes now stood by the front door, labeled, taped shut. If they came back, I'd be ready. I didn't plan on giving them another key. That night, I went through the kitchen drawer where I'd kept emergency cash. Tucked beneath some rubber bands and takeout menus was another envelope, this one from a year ago. Liana's handwriting. A shopping list with prices, totals, and a note at the bottom. Can you cover this, May? We're tight this month again. Promise we'll pay you back after taxes. She had signed it with a heart. I folded the paper neatly and burned it in the sink. No anger, just closure. The next morning, I woke early. dressed in real clothes, not just house things. Pulled on my boots and coat and walked to the town square. The lawyer's office wasn't open, but the florist was. "Good morning, May," the young girl behind the counter chirped. "Looking for anything special today?" "Yes," I said. "For myself." I chose white tulips. Clean, uncomplicated. No symbolism, just beauty. When I got home, the voicemail light was blinking. 2 messages, both from Mark. The first: "Mom, I know you're angry. I get it. I just think we need to talk." The second, more clipped: "If you're going to freeze us out, maybe at least have the decency to tell us what you want." What I wanted? He still didn't understand. It wasn't about wanting anything. It was about ending what I no longer wanted. I deleted the messages. Then I placed the tulips in a glass pitcher. My only vase had been borrowed by Liana 2 years ago and never returned. The flowers looked just fine where they were. Simple, unapologetic. Like me. Saturday morning, I called Elaine, the lawyer. "I want to move forward with everything we discussed," I said. "House deed, trust account for Zoe, new will. Let's file it all." She didn't ask why, didn't offer comfort, just said, "I'll have the documents ready by Monday. Come in and sign." It was the kind of clarity that didn't need cushioning. After the call, I sat with my tea in the front room, watching the bare trees sway in the wind. The snow had begun to melt in patches, revealing dead grass and the forgotten bones of autumn. Everything looked exposed. Fitting. I spent the next hour going through the last untouched space in the house, the desk in the den. That had always been Mark's spot when they visited. He'd claimed it without asking, kept files there, left things behind. I opened the top drawer. Bank statements, copies of insurance forms, some with my name on them, some not. I sorted through them slowly, methodically. Then I found something that made my stomach go cold. An unsigned form tucked between folders. A draft of a quitclaim deed, the kind that would allow someone to transfer ownership of my house without a sale. The seller line was blank. The buyer read, Mark Hartwood. The handwriting wasn't mine. I stared at it for a long time. It hadn't been filed, hadn't been notarized. But it had been printed. It had been prepared. So he had thought about it. Maybe more than once. Maybe they'd even discussed it. How to manage my affairs when I no longer could. Except I still could. I folded the form and slipped it into my folder for Elaine. That would be part of the paperwork, too. At lunch, I microwaved leftover soup and stood at the sink, watching the steam rise. I remembered the time 2 winters ago when I slipped on the back steps and sprained my wrist. Mark and Liana had taken 3 days to call back. Mark had said, "You should really consider a retirement place, Mom. This house is too much for you." And I'd almost agreed. Almost. Now I looked at the same steps from the kitchen window. Still steep, still icy, but mine. Every creak and crack in this house was mine, and I was keeping it that way. That evening, I opened Zoe's old art box, one she'd left behind last summer. Inside were dried-out markers, crumpled papers, and a drawing of a house. Our house. With my name in a heart above the roof. I set it on the shelf in the guest room, my room now. A reminder. Not everyone forgets. Not everyone lies. Just most of them. At 7, the doorbell rang. I didn't expect it. When I opened the door, Mark stood there, holding the 2 boxes I'd packed. His mouth was tight. "Thought I'd drop these off," he said. "Didn't want them sitting in your hallway." I said nothing. Just stepped aside so he could set them down. He placed them carefully, then looked at me. "Are we really doing this?" he asked. I looked at him. Really looked. There was still a piece of the boy I'd raised in there. But it was buried deep beneath layers of entitlement, control, and disappointment. Yes, I said. We are. He looked like he might say more, might try to bargain, but he didn't. Instead, he nodded once and walked back down the steps. He didn't look back. I closed the door, turned the lock, and breathed. Sunday morning, the church bells rang out across the neighborhood. I used to love that sound, symbol of something steady, something good. Now it just reminded me how much time had passed since anything in my life felt sacred. I didn't go to church anymore. I stopped a few years after Zoe was born. It had been our routine, Sunday mornings, her in a little dress, me with a thermos of cocoa for after service. But Mark and Liana said it was too much fuss. They preferred their weekends slow, so I adjusted, like I always did. Now, the house was silent, except for the low rattle of the radiator and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. I lit a candle, not for prayer, for memory. I set it on the kitchen table and sat beside it with my tea. Outside, the wind pushed through the naked trees like a hand searching for something it had dropped. I felt something similar, not regret, but space. That afternoon, I began preparing a small dinner. No guests, no plans, just something warm, seasoned right, made slowly. I chopped carrots, peeled potatoes, marinated chicken. The scent of garlic and thyme filled the house. I used the good dishes, because why not? By evening, the table was set for one, and the sky outside was streaked with the dull gray of a day spent remembering too much. I took my first bite just as the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, then again. On the fourth call I picked up, it was Liana. Her voice was strained, brittle. "May, I don't know what to say anymore," she began. "We've tried being patient. Mark's been heartbroken. Zoe's confused. We're not perfect, but this feels cruel." I didn't speak. She filled the silence. "You're punishing us for a mistake. One mistake." Still, I said nothing. "Are you even listening?" "I am," I said finally. "Then say something," she snapped. "I will, when you stop calling it a mistake." There was a pause, a shift. "I don't know what else to call it," she said, softer now. "Try a choice," I replied. The line was quiet. "You chose to lie. You chose to spend money that wasn't yours. You chose to pretend I'd be too cold, too much trouble, too in the way. May, no. You don't get to control the version of events now. That's over." She let out a breath. "So what? You're cutting us off forever?" "I'm choosing peace," I said. "If that means cutting off people who hurt me, so be it." Another pause. "And Zoe?" My throat tightened. "She's a child," I said. "Not a shield. If you want her to know me, you'll let her. But I won't beg." I hung up. No shaking hands, no tears, just quiet. That night, I watched an old movie with the volume low and the lights dimmed. I laughed out loud once, at a line I'd heard 100 times but never really noticed. "You don't owe anyone your silence just because they once called you family." It wasn't even the point of the scene, just something a side character muttered. But it felt like a permission slip. I rewound the moment and listened again. Then I turned off the TV, blew out the candle, and went to bed. The good dishes sat clean in the sink, catching moonlight. Monday morning brought frost on the window panes and the sound of a car idling outside. I peeked through the curtain. Mark. He was sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead, engine running, like he couldn't quite make up his mind. He didn't come to the door, just sat there, for nearly 10 minutes. Then he drove off. I didn't move, didn't reach for the phone. At noon, I bundled up and walked to Elaine's office. The papers were ready, everything in a neat folder with colored tabs. I read each line slowly, making sure every detail matched the woman I was now, not the mother they'd tried to shape me into. Elaine watched me sign. Then she said, This part's not legal, but I always ask. Want to write a letter to go with it? Something for Zoe, maybe? I paused, then nodded. She handed me a blank sheet. I wrote, "For Zoe, you come from a line of women who've carried more than they were given. Don't ever confuse kindness with obligation. Don't ever let someone spend your silence. And don't ever forget, your worth isn't measured by how much you can endure." I folded it, sealed it. Elaine added it to the trust packet. I walked home with the winter sun low behind me. The street was empty. My footprints the only ones in the snow. When I got back, there was a note taped to the door. Folded once. Torn paper. My name scrawled in sharp letters. I opened it carefully. "Mom, you've made your point, loud and clear. We're trying to move past this, but you're making it impossible. I hope someday you'll remember we're family. Mark." No apology, no ownership. Just accusation draped in guilt. I folded the note and dropped it into the trash. Family doesn't steal from you and call it love. That afternoon, I played Zoe's ukulele for the first time since they'd left it behind. I plucked out a few clumsy notes and laughed at how tinny it sounded. Still, it was something. By evening, I lit another candle. Tulips were wilting in the pitcher, but I let them be. Some things are beautiful even when they're fading. I made cocoa, sat on the couch, let myself feel lonely, but not unloved. There's a difference. Being alone isn't always emptiness. Sometimes it's space, and space is where new things grow. The next day, the silence shifted. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was alert, waiting, like something standing just behind the door. At noon, the doorbell rang. I didn't open it. Instead, I stood in the hallway and listened. A pause, then a knock, then another. I waited until it stopped, until the footsteps moved away. Later, I found a plastic bag left on the porch. Inside, a candle, a tin of cookies, and a handwritten card from Zoe. "Grandma, I don't know why you're sad, but I love you so much. I miss your stories. Please don't forget me. Love, Zoe." My knees nearly gave out. I sat on the step and held the card for a long time, not crying, just holding. I brought the bag inside, set the candle on the windowsill, and put the cookies in the tin drawer. Then I wrote back. Not a reply to Zoe. That would only reach her if her parents allowed it. I wrote for myself, on the back of an old grocery receipt. They taught her to say please and thank you, but not what it means to honor someone, not yet, maybe one day. I tucked it into my notebook. That afternoon, I opened the piano, dusted the keys, played a few clumsy chords. Mark had taken lessons when he was 8, hated every minute. I loved listening, though. Even then, I knew I was the only one who enjoyed it. Funny how that memory still held warmth. The phone rang at dusk. I didn't pick up. Then it rang again, and again. When the machine clicked on, Mark's voice filled the room. "Mom, come on. I don't know what else to say. I know you're mad, but Zoe's hurting now. She keeps asking why you won't see her. What am I supposed to tell her?" I waited. Then Liana's voice, barely audible behind his. "Tell her it's Grandma's choice." That was the only part they got right. It was. I deleted the message and turned the volume down. Later, I sat in the guest room, my room, with a cup of herbal tea. I ran my hand along the smooth quilt, the freshly dusted lamp. Everything felt like it belonged now, because it did. All of it. I curled up in bed early and let the silence settle over me again. Not like a punishment, like a quilt. Thursday morning brought fog. Thick, low, clinging to the trees like an old grudge. I didn't plan to leave the house, but something in me needed air. I bundled up and walked to the edge of the neighborhood. Past the Wiltons' front yard, where their grandkids were building a snow fort, past the corner store that still sold penny candy in jars. Familiar things. Solid things. On the way back, I saw them. Mark and Liana. Standing at the top of my steps, Liana's arms folded tight against her chest, Mark pacing slightly, like he was rehearsing something in his head. They hadn't seen me. I stopped at the corner. Watched. Liana knocked again, then turned to Mark with that look she always gave him when she thought he wasn't doing enough. He stepped forward and tried the door handle. It didn't move. Of course it didn't. They didn't have keys anymore. I stayed still. Eventually, they gave up, walked back to their car. Mark looking over his shoulder once, as if he could sense he was being watched. They drove off slowly. I waited 5 minutes before climbing the steps. A note was wedged under the mat. Not in Mark's handwriting. Liana's. May, this is getting out of hand. You've made your point. We're embarrassed, okay? Is that what you wanted? Come back to the table, for Zoe's sake, if not ours. We're willing to talk. But you need to stop this power play. Power play. That's what she thought this was. Not self-respect, not protection, just control. Funny how people reveal themselves when they think they're entitled to your forgiveness. I folded the note without reading it twice. Dropped it into the fireplace. Watched the flames take it. Later, I called Elaine. Asked about finalizing the trust for Zoe. She'll be able to access it when she turns 25, I said. Not before. And only directly. No intermediaries, no parental management. Elaine agreed. I'll set up the stipulations. It's a smart choice. I'm not doing it to be smart, I replied. I'm doing it to be fair. To one person who never lied to me. That night, I made a list of things to do next. It didn't include calling them. It didn't include explaining myself. It only included what came after. Donate the old coats. Paint the guest room a color I actually like. Find out if the community center still holds Friday book nights. I hadn't thought about joining anything in years. But maybe I would now. Not to prove I wasn't alone. Just to remember what it felt like not to be invisible. At 9:30, the phone rang again. I didn't answer. The machine clicked on. Zoe's voice, small, hesitant. Grandma, I don't really understand what's going on. Daddy says you're upset because we went on a trip. I didn't know you didn't want us to go. I just thought you didn't like beaches. Silence. Then her voice again, softer. I made you a bracelet. It has your name in beads. I'll leave it in the mailbox tomorrow. I sat down slowly. There was no script for this kind of ache. No instruction on how to love someone without letting them pull you back into a fire they didn't start, but would happily let you burn in. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting her voice fade into the room like steam. Then I stood, blew out the candle, and whispered into the still air. I love you too, Zoe. But I love me now too. Friday morning, I found the bracelet in the mailbox. Tiny plastic beads strung onto a rainbow cord, my name misspelled slightly. May. But all the more perfect for it. There was no note. Just the bracelet and a folded paper with a sun and 2 stick figures holding hands. One had gray hair. I traced it with my finger. Then I put it on. Not to forgive. Not to forget. But to remember who still saw me. At noon, Mark showed up again. No knock this time. He just stood on the porch as if the wood beneath his feet might crack open and swallow him whole. I watched from the window. He held something in his hand, a folder. Plain, brown, probably one of the ones he'd always used for family planning, a phrase that used to mean vacation schedules and birthday budgets. Now it sounded like strategy. Eventually, I opened the door, not wide, just enough. He didn't smile. That was new. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. "Really, talk." I said nothing. He held out the folder. "I found this in my office. I'd forgotten about it. It's from before." I didn't reach for it. He looked down. "It's a binder of all the things you paid for. Over the years. I started keeping it after Zoe was born. I guess, I don't know. Maybe I felt guilty. Maybe I wanted to keep track." He swallowed. "There's stuff in there I never even told Liana about. Tuition deposits, mortgage help, even our honeymoon. I wrote it all down because I told myself I'd pay you back. One day. Still, I didn't take it." Mark's voice cracked. "But I never did. And when we used your card, when we lied, I told myself it was just more of the same, that it didn't really matter anymore." He looked up. "But it does. I know it does now." Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. He tried again. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't if I were you. But I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry." His hands trembled slightly. "I didn't come to ask for money or access or anything. I just came to admit what I did. What we did." He stepped back, placed the folder gently on the porch railing, and turned to go. At the edge of the steps, he hesitated. "Zoe still wears that necklace you gave her, the one with the little compass on it. She says it reminds her to always find her way back to you." Then he left. I didn't pick up the folder right away. I sat in the kitchen for a long time, watching the steam rise from my mug. I didn't know what to feel. Not absolution, not reconciliation. Just a pause. A breath in a storm that had lasted far too long. That afternoon, I went to the community center. Just walked in. No agenda. No appointment. There was a sign-up sheet for Friday night book club. I wrote my name down. M-A-Y. Not May, not Mom. Not the one who always covers the bill. Just May. Someone who had decided she didn't need a permission slip to exist. Friday night, I walked into the book club 15 minutes early. The room smelled like overbrewed coffee and cinnamon rolls from the bakery next door. There were 12 chairs arranged in a loose circle, most of them empty. I took one near the window. I didn't bring a book. Didn't even ask what they were reading. I just sat there, breathing in the unfamiliar air of something that didn't revolve around anyone's expectation of me. Other women trickled in, most my age, some older, one younger, maybe 40, with the look of someone who didn't want to be noticed but needed to be seen. They nodded at me. I nodded back. The conversation started slow, the way strangers talk when they're used to being overlooked. But then someone mentioned how hard it is to raise children who grow up into people you wouldn't necessarily choose, and the room cracked open, not loud, not angry, just honest. I didn't speak at first. I listened. To women talk about daughters who married men that made them smaller, sons who only came around when something broke, grandchildren they loved but only saw in pictures. Then someone said, "Sometimes I wonder if I taught them to take me for granted." And my voice surprised me by joining in. "You didn't teach them," I said. "They just learned anyway." Heads turned, not in shock, but in recognition. A woman across the circle nodded slowly. "And we unlearn it later, after we've already given away most of what we are." There were no tears. Just that quiet kind of agreement that lives in women who've held back too long. Afterward, one of the women walked with me to the door. "First time?" she asked. "Yes." "You coming back?" I smiled. "I think I already did." We laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't need to be clever, just true. At home, the house felt less like a cave and more like a place I'd chosen. The guest room, the room that had once been a placeholder for other people's lives, felt rooted now. Warm. I took off my coat, sat on the edge of the bed, and picked up Zoe's bracelet from the nightstand. Held it in my palm. No plan, no answer, just the weight of something that still mattered. Then I pulled out a sheet of stationery, the good kind, thick and soft, that I used to save for thank you notes I never sent. And I began to write. Dear Zoe, you are loved. That part never changed. But love doesn't mean always saying yes. It doesn't mean letting people hurt you because they once called you their own. It means telling the truth, even when it's quiet, even when it's hard. Someday, when you're older, you'll understand more. And when you do, I'll still be here. If you want to find me, follow the sound of your own voice. I'll be the echo that doesn't try to shape it. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, wrote only her name on the front. Not to send yet, not to deliver, just to have ready. Because this wasn't the end of the story, just the part where I stopped writing myself out of it. The first warm wind of March slipped through the window I'd cracked open, just enough to stir the curtains. I stood in the kitchen, a pie cooling on the counter, hands dusted with flour. Not for guests, not for family, just for me. The bracelet was still on my wrist, faded now, one of the beads chipped, but I hadn't taken it off. Some things you keep, not because they're whole, but because they remind you you are. The doorbell rang. I knew the sound now, not a threat, not a tremor, just a sound. I opened the door and found no one, only a small box wrapped in blue paper. Zoe's handwriting across the top. For Grandma May. Inside, a picture, drawn in marker and glitter. 2 figures again, one tall, one small. The tall one had a cane this time. The small one had wings. Below it, 3 words in crooked letters. You still shine. I stood there for a long time, wind brushing at my skirt, box in hand. Then I brought it inside and placed it on the shelf, right next to the letter I hadn't sent. Maybe I would one day, but not now. Now was quiet. Now was mine. That afternoon, I called the community center and volunteered to teach a baking class on Tuesdays. Nothing fancy, I told them. Just biscuits. Maybe pie. They said they'd love that. And I believed them. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone filling space in other people's plans. I was making my own. I opened the windows wide that evening. Let the wind move through the rooms. Let it shake loose whatever dust still clung to the corners. I made tea, sat by the window, watched the streetlights blink on. Didn't check the phone. Didn't rehearse old arguments. Just breathed. They say healing is loud, but I think it's quiet. It's a decision you make when no one's watching, when there's no applause, no instant reward, just your name spoken gently by your own mouth, just your worth counted without witnesses, just your peace. Finally yours. So if you're reading this, if you've been the quiet one, the giving one, the afterthought who held everything together until your own name faded, don't wait for them to see you. See yourself. That's where it starts. And that's where it can begin again.